Hi, it's Jerry Roberts, and we are back with our ongoing series of community conversations. This morning, we are joined by my colleague, the Santa Barbara journalist Josh Molina. Welcome. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Jerry. How are you?
All right. Have you got enough My Little Pony going there at home, or?
Yeah, I got My Little Pony on in the other room. We had a Zoom session this morning, so we're taking a little diversion. It's sort of like indoor recess before we head outside and do some real activity.
All right. Well, I wanted to talk to you, as you know, this morning about, I guess you're launching a new podcast today. What is it called? Why are you doing a podcast now?
Well, Jerry, I don't think we can live by Zoom interviews alone. Just kidding.
Hey, I have the podcast version.
Yes, I know. No, I've had an idea for a podcast for a long time. Anybody who's knows me and who's talked to me in any kind of detail knows that I've mentioned it several times over the last year and a half. And the idea was
10 years.
What's that?
5 years.
10 years, 5 years. Yes. Well, yes, it's had many sort of versions, but basically what I want to do is offer people an opportunity to listen to extended conversations with people in the community who are knowledgeable, who are experts, who have perspectives on the issues of the day. And right now, of course, we're dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. So there's so much to be talked about. There's so much conversation. And there's so many people who are really doing a lot of amazing things right now. And it's really a good time to sort of focus on how Santa Barbara is looking to rebuild, how Santa Barbara is looking to revitalize downtown. And when I had this idea a while back, things were already sort of difficult. But now with the pandemic, it's almost even more urgent to diversify the platforms in the community. I've been a reporter for 20 years, and in that time, I've had some great conversations with people, and the amount that actually makes it into a story is, as you know, Jerry, it's 15%, 10%, it's a couple of quotes. And a lot of times there's a lot of stuff left on the cutting room floor. And the idea with this podcast is to not compete with the local journalism in the community, but the idea is to offer something different. I know that Santa Barbara really enjoys having conversations with people and understanding what's going on behind the scenes. And this is a platform and an opportunity for people to hear straight from community leaders in a way that they can't really in other settings and other platforms. And what I bring to it is 20 years of journalistic experience. I mean, I know how to ask questions. I know how to ask people things that are going to provoke answers that people are interested in. And I have sort of a history and a knowledge of Santa Barbara that I think is valuable to this community. And so that's sort of how it originated. And I want to sort of bring my expertise and knowledge and history and curiosity really to sort of try out this endeavor. It's going to be a work in progress, and it's going to look a lot different, in a week, a month, 6 months, a year. But I think it's something this community really needs. And I know there are a lot of people who want to talk about how they think Santa Barbara can survive, how Santa Barbara can get better and continue to be sort of this really unique, amazing community.
Yeah. So when you started talking about this, of course, it was very much focused on development issues, housing, transportation, what's going to happen with downtown, things of that category. So now, as you mentioned, you're bringing it on in the middle of well, it's not really the beginning of the pandemic. So is it still going to be focused on that issue, or is it going to be very COVID centric, or, how do those two things sort of relate in terms of the guests and the questions that you'll be asking?
Well, the idea is to focus on issues of housing, business, transportation, and education. And in my reporting, these are the issues that thread all of us in the community. We all have sort of a perspective and a stake on what's going on in these issues. So I think in that context, through that lens, obviously the COVID-19 pandemic threads all of that. We've seen schools shut down. We've seen an economic shutdown. There's questions about speeding up housing downtown. There's so much going on right now, and it all ties together. So I think that obviously any guest who I have on the show right now, we're going to want to talk about how the COVID-19 pandemic is affecting them. But what I really also want to offer with this podcast is sort of a conversation where you get to know some of these people beyond just the politics of the moment and beyond just the headlines. I have a great conversation on the website with Ben Romo, who I've known for 20 years. And we talk about business downtown, we talk about housing, but we also talk about what it's like to grow up in this community and the challenges we face and the difficulty in trying to make it work and live here in a place you grew up. And there's a lot of really rich dialogue that is interesting, and you're just not going to get that anywhere else in the current landscape. Podcasting is something that's amazingly big and popular around the world, around the country. And in Santa Barbara, this is an opportunity to sort of be able to talk to people in a way that they haven't really been spoken to lately.
And of course, you're one of the two hardest working men in show business. You're teaching pretty much almost full time out at City College in the journalism program. You got two kids. You're very involved in parenting, and most of your work appears on Newshawk. So is this is this a part of Newshawk? Is it separate? Is it your brand? What's the relationship there?
Yeah, so this is my endeavor. This is something that I'm doing on my own. It's separate from Newshawk. I had the idea a long time ago. Originally, it was the idea of doing a sort of list, top 10 things, just trying to offer people something interesting. And then I started to think, well, how can we sort of do something that's not being done in this town and have it not be gimmicky, but have it be something rich and vibrant? So this is something that I'm doing. It's on my own. The audience will be what it is, but it's something I'm having a lot of fun with, and I really think brings a lot of value to the community. I got started. My friend David Ball started. He sat down with me together. We sat down. We looked at it. We researched it. We figured out how we could do it. So he's been super helpful. He's a tech friend that I have, and I started recording at Kiva Co-work, which used to be the Impact Hub downtown. And I actually started recording back in late January, early February. And it was really cool. They have an amazing podcast studio and they're supportive. They walk me through.
Are they sponsoring you?
Yeah, well, we haven't gotten that far, but they're definitely supportive and they're talking to me. And basically what they did
Nice job getting the plug in though. That was good. You kind of worked that right in.
Well, I mean, just to be real honest, the way it works was, I've been talking about this idea, as you know, to so many people, and Michael Lewis at Kiva Co-work, he's one of the people I was talking to, and he said, hey, why don't you come just do it in our podcast studio, start it, see if you like it, see if it's something that you want to keep doing. And he gave me 10 free sessions, and he said, just go for it. Unfortunately, before the 10 sessions were up, we had the shelter in place, and so things shut down. So we're kind of in the middle there, but I think the idea was, yeah, we support you and we would love to be able to sponsor you or help you. And that's sort of how that originated. But he sort of showed me how to do the podcast and how to do the technical side of it. After things closed, I had to go out and invest in some equipment and buy some microphone and go out and interview people, on location. So that's sort of, that's probably the biggest challenge that I have right now, is just sort of mastering and perfecting that technical side. But again, this is something that I'm loving. It's something that I'm doing. I'm figuring it out. And I think that the interviews, as you know, Jerry, content is king. And the interviews are incredible. They're solid. I mean, I've talked to Ben Romo.
Who have you talked to beside Ben?
So City Councilwoman Megan Harmon, we talked about obviously what Santa Barbara can do to rebuild out of this pandemic. She represents the downtown, but she's got this big regional sort of perspective. She also talks about what it's like to be a mom during this period, where you have to sort of spend time and still be your child's teacher, but also devoting to public service I talked to Brian Cornell, who's an architect downtown, who's he's designed so many different housing projects. And he's got some great, strong views that you're just not going to hear in a news story or during a council meeting, where he's going in depth about a variety of things. I talked to Bob Stout, who's the president of the Downtown Association. I talked to Barrett Reed, who's sort of the rising political star. He's been appointed to the Planning Commission, and he's the developer, the co-founder of the Miramar Group, and so he's somebody who's really interesting. So I'm trying to sort of offer a platform and a voice for people who are doing so much in this community, who are helping to build this community, but aren't necessarily the big city hall power brokers that we get to hear from all the time. It's a platform for everyone in the community with multiple perspectives. I also
all right, Megan's not going to like you saying she's not a city hall power broker. I'm just saying. And where can people find it?
And one thing, I talked to Wendy Sims Moten too, who's with the First Five Santa Barbara County. She's the executive director, and she's on the school board, and she talks a lot about COVID-19 impacts on 0 through 5 children. So the website is santabarbaratalks.com. And what I did was I went and banked.
Say it again.
It's santabarbaratalks.com.
One word.
Yes, all one word, santabarbaratalks.com. And basically the premise is Santa Barbara Talks with Josh Molina. And that's what I'm doing. I banked 10 interviews. So you can see 10 podcasts, or you can listen to 10 podcast interviews on the site right now. I didn't want to launch with just one or two. There's diversity, there's a variety of stuff to listen to. And I'm shooting for 2 podcasts a week. And so people can stay up to date. The idea, Jerry, is they're about 30, 45 minutes max long. You can listen to them on your commute from Ventura and Santa Maria. We know we have almost 20,000 people who come into Santa Barbara every day.
Or at least
if you don't live in the city, you are deeply involved and you care about what's happening in Santa Barbara. So the idea is you can listen to it on a drive, at lunch, any sort of break, a diversion. They're not super long where hopefully you're going to get bored, but just the right length.
All right. Let me pivot here, as our friend Laura Capps might say. So in talking about these issues, development, transportation, housing, so on and so forth, in the midst of the pandemic, it seems to me that just from the people I've been talking to, there's 2 basic ways of looking at that. You mentioned Megan Harmon, and when I spoke with her, she said, this is a great opportunity for us to really decide what kind of city we want, to build from here, to take a big swing at it. And I think if you, kind of read some of the stuff that the Montecito Journal's been writing, they're really on board that and pushing that as an editorial perspective. But then when I talked to Paul Casey, the city administrator, the other day, he said, hey, look, I got my head down on this crisis. I mean, this is the worst public health crisis since the 1950s. It's probably the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. I don't have time, basically, and I'm paraphrasing, but this is not a good time for kind of big think visionary stuff. So, do you think that kind of captures what the debate is right now? And what are we seeing downtown and in City Hall about how that's playing out?
Well, I think it captures the perspectives of those 2 individuals, because you need both. And obviously, Megan Harmon is a city council member and she's a politician. And if she's doing her job well, she's not going to bury her head and lay low, because that's not what people want out of their politicians. She wants to figure out a way to turn this into something that is a positive, that's a good thing, in the sense of how can we build out of this in a way that was better than before this all started. So she absolutely, from a political analysis perspective, needs to have that approach, that attitude. She's 33 years old. She just got elected to the city council. She's got a long future. So when she's talking about making this a milestone moment, what she's talking about is what people want to hear. They don't want to hear from their politicians. We just need to sort of put our head down and get through it. But what Paul Casey is doing is kind of the best job he can do because he's under the gun. There's a lot of pressure on him, and he's trying to manage the organization in a way that is a different job than what a city council member has to do. He's trying to survive himself and make sure that he's not a job casualty out of this. You know, he wants to keep his spot because there's a lot of pressure on him, and he's the top guy. So of course he's trying to lay low and just sort of manage the nuts and bolts of the organization, the day-to-day stuff, the people that don't, the things that people don't necessarily see but are super important in terms of how the Santa Barbara comes out of this. And Paul has some other people in his at City Hall that also are under the gun. So Paul's doing sort of the thing that he has to do right now, which is try to figure out a way to stop the bleeding. Whereas somebody like Megan Harmon is saying, we want to figure out a way to make this the defining moment of Santa Barbara and come out of this better than ever. And it's two different roles.
Well, and then I'm going to talk later today with Ed St. George, the developer and property manager. And as you know, he and a number of his colleagues in the business community are pretty openly campaigning to replace Paul Casey. And I wonder what's your sense of, is that gaining any traction? Are people saying, wait a minute, this is not the right time to be doing this? We don't want to, we have this massive disruption. We don't want to add to it. I mean, what's your sense of where that kind of movement stands?
Well, I think it stems from, there are a lot of business people in town who don't feel connected to City Hall. And it's no one person's fault, but if you look at the politics of it, it's sort of the mayor's job to be inclusive with everyone in the community. And so when we have these people who are going after the city administrator, the community development director, and others, it's really because they feel powerless and they don't feel as though they have any sort of access to City Hall in a way where they feel valued. And that's really something that the mayor historically has been instrumental in trying to be able to build community support. Our current mayor she's got sort of a different approach on these things. And there's a lot of people who are sort of in the business community anyway, who are kind of unhappy with her leadership. So
different approach, meaning what? She's very, very below the radar. She's driving on Cabrillo Boulevard, trying to see if people are 6 feet apart. I mean, where is she?
Well, the mayor's job is super tough. I mean, look at her predecessor. Look at Helene Schneider. She swept in and everybody, she had everybody on her side. And she sort of fell out of favor with certain pockets of the community. Kathy Murillo is still sort of trying to figure out her identity and her brand as a mayor. Is she going to be a mayor?
3 years into it.
Exactly. And that's why there's a lot of frustration. Is she going to be a mayor who tries to bring everybody together? Or is she going to be a mayor who's loyal to, the people who support her only? And as we know, great leaders cannot just reach out to the people who agree with them. They need to reach out with the people who don't agree with them, because those are the greatest opportunities for progress. And so she hasn't quite figured that out yet. I think, yes, it is gaining traction. It is gaining support. Something's going to happen at City Hall because of all of this business discontent. And it was going to happen before COVID-19. Something's going to happen out of it, because COVID-19 has just stressed everybody out in a way where things are so much worse. We have this economic shutdown, and City Hall now knows what businesses have been talking about for a while, which is they are struggling financially. They can't open, they can't remodel, they have complaints about the permitting process. And now City Hall can say, oh, we just don't empathize, we sympathize, because we've lost so much of our revenue too. So they're feeling it. And I think that something is going to happen. I don't know if it's going to be Paul. I don't know if that means they're going to run somebody against Kathy and it's going to be an explosive mayor's race. I don't know if there's going to be changes in the community development department, but I can't imagine. This isn't just a fringe group. There are people who are taking the lead on this, but there's a lot of people in the business community who want to see somebody take some sort of decisive leadership action in the community. Kathy Murillo had that chance with her task force, but even that got off to the wrong start because people felt excluded. I mean, you have to play the political game in the sense of you have to make people feel included. You have to start from the bottom in order for everybody to feel like they have a voice and they have a role. Nobody likes being told what to do. Nobody likes being told, we value your opinion, but that just does not work, especially in Santa Barbara, where everybody's so smart and active and engaged and has been around a long time and knows how to play this game.
Well, let me ask you about a couple of very specific things that have been going on, and it just seems like they've followed one after another in pretty short time. We have this 20-year, I guess, or no more than 20 years extension of the lease at Paseo Nuevo. We have this proposal for a big housing project at the former Staples site. We have the AUD amendments for downtown suddenly surfacing. Is this all a hurry up from George Buell at Community Development to attempt to save his job, or is this just coincidence? Why is this all happening all at once?
I don't think anything really happens out of coincidence. So I think that there are things that are moving a little bit quicker because of all this pressure. Certainly the AUD amendments were sped up, and that was all for political purposes. There are people on the council saying, we need to do this now. We don't have time to wait. We've been spending years on this. We need to move now to facilitate development in the downtown. And initially, if you watch that city council meeting, the planners were a little bit apprehensive, and all of a sudden they figured out a way to make it work the following week. So we're seeing a little bit of that. Paseo Nuevo was in the works. It was sort of a continuation of that meeting. They had been talking about it for a year, but I think what we're seeing is, or what we're going to need to see, is a little bit of transparency on the part of the community development department, because this isn't a city where if you don't respond to questions, people are just going to go away. This is a city where if you don't respond, if government doesn't respond to the public's concerns, they're going to do what they're doing, which is raise and cause a lot of commotion. And that's what's happening right now. And I think that George Buell definitely has finally figured out that I've got to figure out a way to be more accessible to the community and show more leadership. Whether it's too late or not, we'll find out. There's a lot of puzzle pieces that need to be worked out. You know, we're seeing Megan Harmon step up as a leader. We're seeing Oscar Gutierrez, Alejandro Gutierrez stepping up as a leader. Mike Jordan, you know, he's always sort of had that. You know, everyone on the council, Kristen, Eric Friedman, everybody is fighting for their voice on there. And Kathy Murillo is sort of feeling that impact. You know, there's not a unified city hall political vision. And that might be one of the things that changes because of all of this. Something big could happen there.
Real quick, given what's happened with retail downtown and retail around the world, really, with Amazon and so on, and with the large number of empty storefronts on State Street, which is likely to, you know, increase, is it a smart play to go with a long range lease for Paseo Nuevo, which is really, you know, kind of the 1990s answer to, you know, the core of the economy for downtown Santa Barbara? Is that the right direction?
Well, I mean, it depends on, you know, your perspective. There are some people who feel as though it's dated, and how much turnover has there been in that mall over the years? And can you really call the mall a success outside of its architecture? There's obviously lots of turnover. We had lost one anchor tenant. It's hard to know. They say they're going to turn it into an experiential type of place, but the challenge with that is the more successful Paseo Nuevo is, the more it potentially could impact State Street. Because if people say they're only going to go to Paseo Nuevo, well, maybe they're not going to decide to walk the many long blocks of State Street. So I think that the City Hall is hopeful that if you have a property owner who's willing to invest $20 million into their development, that's a good thing. But we know that there's people who have lots of perspectives on what should happen with that mall and whether there's going to be any sort of unifying voice. Some people want housing. There's no housing. They want people to open up that Macy's building and be able to have access onto Ortega Street, knock down a few walls so it's not necessarily just this own little island to itself. I think there are plenty of business people, Jerry, who would say it's the worst idea in the world to be able to invest in a long-term lease in Paseo Nuevo, because Paseo Nuevo was awesome for its time, but now it's gonna probably need something else. I think that there's plenty of business people who think that, but I don't think anybody really knows the future and knows the answer.
Yeah, and it goes back to that broader debate, I think, about, do we want to start from scratch and reinvent everything, or do we want to move incrementally and, build on what we have and take it from there? So in terms of the politics of it, Kathy's got to run next year, right?
Yes, she's running again, right?
Is you see anybody who's preparing themselves to jump in there?
I think Hal Conklin is probably going to run for mayor. If you ask him that question, he'll say, "Oh, that's so far away." But I think he's positioning himself. I know he's been meeting with business leaders himself to sort of be their voice for, at a time when Kathy may not be connecting with them. Certainly the business community, this movement, all these people are unhappy with Casey and Kathy. They're going to get somebody to run, and they're going to try to get somebody formidable to run. I mean, some people want Megan Harmon to run, and I don't think politically that would.
She
doesn't want to
ruled it
run
out.
politically.
She ruled it out. She's on the record ruling it out on Newsmakers.
Yes. So we've never heard a politician change their mind, of course, when it comes to running. But I think a lot of people like to see somebody like her run. We might see a whole bunch of candidates. It might be a free for all, and
which would help Kathy.
That would, of course, help Kathy, because it would split the vote, and all the people who like her would get her. So I think it's going to be a lot of people who are running in that campaign.
All right, real quick, we just got a minute. This poor fella, Jason Harris, who takes the job as the economic development director before the coronavirus, really the impact hit, is now here. And I'm sure he's doing his best and dancing as fast as he can. What's your take on him?
It's still pretty early. I think he's trying to figure out how to work within Santa Barbara's apparatus. He's super nice guy. He's cheery. He's positive. He's optimistic. He's got all the buzzwords. He says that we need to reactivate the community all the time. So, I mean, he's got it down, the big picture, but I don't know. I mean, what can any one person do? The best thing you can do is network and make some connections and get to know people and be assertive. As you know, Jerry, you're not going to get anything done necessarily if you're just going to toe the line. So he might want to be a little bit bolder here as he gets his footing.
Well, and the other thing is, I mean, Paul Casey is his boss. I mean, he reports to Paul Casey. He really has no staff. So now he's going to have to figure out how to navigate this very awkward situation where you got guys gunning for Paul Casey. And when he's out, or talking to people, I'm sure that's going to come up. So good luck on that, Jason Harris. We'll be talking to you soon. All right, Josh, thanks for talking to us. Good luck with the podcast. And what's the website again?
The podcast can be found at santabarbaratalks.com. And it's also on SoundCloud and other platforms. But the primary hub is santabarbaratalks.com. And there's 10 really interesting podcasts there already.
All right, man. All right. Okay. Be safe out there.